Good morning and welcome to Rise and Shine Sundays. My name is Jamie Rich, and this is the place where every week we have a live, unscripted conversation around a topic, usually a question. And in this particular event, the question that we'll be talking about this morning is actually something nonverbal. We're talking about what happens when a silence is shared. Last week, when we were having Rise and Shine Sundays, we were having a really full conversation, and we had been building and building and talking about things. And there were wisdom that rises in the room when we have these conversations. And we had reached that moment when there was this complete fullness, and we all just paused, and there was this silence. And one of our good colleagues that's a part of our roundtable on a regular basis said, "We are now all experiencing the fullness of silence." And so this morning, we're kind of staying with that idea. Not as silence as something awkward, and not as silence as something that you feel because you don't know what else to do, but silence as something that can actually hold things together. I mean, what happens when silence is shared? When there is this time, we talk a lot on Rise and Shine Sundays about a pause. What happens when that pause is shared? What happens when the silence isn't something that is something that gets to be added to or changed, but it's something that collectively can fill a space with a wonderful moment of awareness? And speaking of feeling a wonderful moment of awareness, we're inviting you to participate in this moment of awareness as we have this discussion. You can either chat with us on YouTube through the Breakthrough Show Network. You can actually, if you want to, join us live in the room for the discussion at rsslive.org. And if you do, you will be joining this merry band of tricksters who are with us. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, good afternoon, good night, good everything.
Good morning.
Good interstellar time.
So not only are we talking then about the fullness of silence, Djaloki has also introduced the concept this morning of the fullness of time. So whatever time it is that you're watching, silence is kind of a universal. I know that every week when we have these conversations, it's not necessary that you have watched the episode that preceded before or the episode that's going to come after. Everything is complete in and of itself. But one of the things that we've discovered is that when we have a moment to just sort of come to the co-sensed meaning of what we're having a discussion about, it's really helpful. So what we do is kind of begin to examine not only the question, what happens when silence is shared, but let's take apart some of that sentence and say, well, all right, Sang, if you'd be willing to help us, when you hear that question, what do you think is important that we sort of anchor in on to have a discussion?
When silence is uncomfortable, right? Everyone thinks silence is uncomfortable. And for myself, being a child who wasn't allowed, I'm not able, wasn't allowed to speak as a child or express anything, silence became a norm for me, not to say anything, but just let everyone else speak. And it didn't matter what mine was, right? As I got older and started having conversations, I wanted to fill the silence, right? I wanted to fill it because I was like, if I say something, because now I'm allowed to say something in my adult life, if I can say something, then I can fix whatever is happening. That was my theory. I could fix it. Just let me explain. And then I went into like this massive over explaining all the time, probably till like a couple months ago. Probably still do sometimes, right? Because the silence to me, I took it, this is why my experience is different, silent treatment. So the silent treatment and being jointly silent together is way different. I was given the silent treatment. And so anytime anything went silent for me, I automatically went into, I've got to fix this because I'm getting the silent treatment from somebody and I need to fill the void. But as I've gotten older, I've been able to sit in the silence and just be. And it took me back to an exercise that I know we've had these exercises, and if you haven't, I invite you to do so. Where you go to some workshop or something, and they tell you to find a neighbor or find somebody, and they just want you to sit there and stare at each other. It's uncomfortable at first, but then so much is revealed in those moments. And to me, that's that shared silence of like, let's see what we can learn about one another without any words at all.
Mm-hmm. You introduced a wonderful concept that we all kind of take for granted, which is the silent treatment. So, we talk a lot about trying to stay away from the fix, trying to stay away from the solution, trying to stay for what's sort of emerging, right? But now you've introduced this whole idea that how are we going to treat this silence, right? And what silence reveals to us so often is our conditioning around being uncomfortable and being vulnerable.
Yes.
And so when we sit with that, then we have to think about the silent treatment. Is silent treatment something universal, Ray? You're really, is that a phrase that is common?
Well, I'm familiar with it, and what's wonderful of what Sang and yourself have done is, okay, how is silence perceived? What does it mean? And how do we use it? So back to what you just said, the silent treatment is someone shutting somebody out by demonstrating I'm consciously shutting you out by not connecting in with you. But silence is a form of communication, as what Sang just shared. It is a way to observe, to take a pause, which allows us to say what is going on, or how do I feel. So I think silence is a multi-dimensional, functional part of communication, and is not always it's not a deficiency.
Right.
Silence isn't a void that you have to fill up. That's the law. So toss it back to you guys. Is the
That was a wonderful volley, by the way. Thank you, Ray. Because silence as deficiency is something that in corporate worlds it is really viewed as a deficiency. Like if we're going to have a meeting and we bring everybody together, Djaloki, how many times have you been brought in as a consultant to help people in a business sense sit around in a room and be silent?
Well, thank you for the question, Jamie. I may not have been asked to do that often, but I've done that often. and sometimes it's understood and sometimes less. You caught me off guard because
That's all right.
The first thing I wanted to say not was in the book that some says is the most read book in the world. There's a chapter, if I'm not mistaken, by someone we know as John, which starts something like that. In the beginning was the Word. So when I read this, I understand before the beginning was silence. And for me, what it means is that silence is where everything comes from. And so whatever is not silence is already inside the silence, and we take it out of the silence. When we speak or sing or make noise, we're not filling a void, we're actually extracting something that is full. And for me, silence, especially from my human experience in this plane, is the first and maybe ultimate form of spirituality. and many form of spiritualities invite people to go into silence as a way of connection. You know, the commonly known as 4 forms of prayers. You know, you have praise. You know, you're great. You have a petition. You know, please, please give me something. I need. You have intercession. You know, please for someone else. And you have thanksgiving. Thank you. Those, you know, any prayer they say is a combination of those 4. But the ultimate prayer, silence, communion, the real communion. So yeah, silence for me is the basis of sacredness. Now, when it's shared, you know, with in group, you know, between humans, I see, and I'm going to be brief. I see levels. First, I remember what my elders taught me. You know, when you're in a conversation with other people, before saying anything, make sure that what you have to say is more beautiful than silence.
Mm.
Mm.
So if it's not, shut up. The second level for me is presence.
Mm-hmm.
If I really want to communicate with you, first I have to listen to you. And at least for me, I listen better when I'm silent. Now, in a conversation, especially some type of conversation, it's not always easy to remain silent because, as Sang was saying, you know, blah, blah, blah. First we want to fill the void. There's a discomfort, and then I want to say thing, I want to fix thing, I want to offer thing, I want to show, you know, what I know, who I am, what I can give, etc. So actually, to be able to remain silent just for a few seconds requires a work, maybe years of work of healing in myself. So being present to me, to you, to them, to everything is not just okay, I'm going to do it. It's a lifelong journey. And when I've engaged in this journey, and the more I go into this journey, I realize that silence is always there, even in the cacophony, even if the noise, the you know, decibel, silence is always there, and I can always connect with it. And when I connect with silence, I connect with, I'm going to use the term to make it simple so other can speak. I connect with the divine.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. You know, you did have something beautiful to fill the silence with. So let me recall some of the beautiful things that you said. Um, you said that silence is source, right? Silence is connection when it's experienced as that communion, right? Um, and the other thing that I thought that was so, you reminded us, of course, at the end that silence is always present, and it's a matter of something that we can tap into, right? So you were beginning to build kind of a tautology, or not. I wish Ollie were here. He could explain. So the idea that there's silence, there's presence, and then there becomes expression, right? Because I know that there are sometimes when I am in silence and I am filled with that presence, it fills me with something that I have a need to express, right? And maybe that wisdom of your elders to make sure that whatever expresses from that presence is a contribution, you know, something beautiful, something that adds to. Those are really, really potent reminders. So I want to invite anyone else if they want to weigh in on this. We'll take a little silent beat here, but it's going back to what you sort of introduced us to, which is the fullness of silence, allowing things to be there, and then seeing what emerges that's in contribution from it.
Mm. I know for me, as I'm sitting here in this silence, I'm thinking about something that someone said to me a couple weeks ago. And they said, saying, I don't want you to shut down, so let me know if I'm overstepping. Because I have a tendency to shut down and be like, I don't want to talk about it anymore. But then it becomes someone else trying to fill the void. Even though I've stated I don't want to talk about it. And so it was fascinating for this person to say that to me and to begin with, because I didn't even recognize, I was not aware that they recognized when I did shut down. And so that awareness was key too for myself. I love it when Jamie does this.
Well, a thought occurred to me with what you were saying, and I wanted to see if I could invite Claudia to if you're willing to respond to this question, because I know you've done a lot of work, presence work in terms of working with people, but silence isn't not talking.
Right.
Yes, that's very correct. There was, I think it was a Greek philosopher, Pythagoras, who said, a fool is known by his speech and a wise man by silence. I think so often we go into, and I'm just building on what Djaloki said because he said it so beautifully. I don't know that I can say too much more beyond that. When we are in communion with someone, or let's say not communion, but conversation with someone, it is interesting to me when there is a conversation among people and I am silent through that conversation. I can see others trying to fill the void of silence. And what is said is usually not very pertinent to the conversation. And so, but yet there are other groups of people that I commune with, like the circle that Djaloki and I belong to, where silence is totally fine and acceptable, and we'll just sit there with it. So I think it, and when I'm in a conversation with a group or with other people, the presence I give by being silent and allowing the conversation and really hearing it, because I'm silent within myself too. And I'm that way so that I can really be with the other people. And it's kind of funny because when the conversation is going on and then everyone looks to me to say something and I don't, I get these puzzled looks like, okay, are you going to say something or are you just going to sit there? Well, many times I'll just say, I have nothing to add. you know, unless I do. And then I do. But yes, sitting in silence is a way to really gather the wisdom of what is being said, or to turn away what does not feel true to me and not have to respond to that. So silence is, yeah, depending on the group of people where you're with, silence can be a deadly thing or it can be a beautiful thing.
Yep. Yeah. Because in that silence, your awareness, if you use that, there were so many things that were rich with what you said. We talk about silent reminders or silence. Uh, there's a silent reminder, but you were talking about what silence allows us to remember and re-experience.
Mhm.
And that silence's greatest companion is listening.
Right.
There's this tendency to think that silence is stillness, and it can be, right? But silence can be it can be multidimensional in terms of how you want to experience it. And oftentimes there is that, when you are silent and you can feel that collective discomfort from that silence, it is again something that is developing your capacity to experience the silence as a contribution, and not saying that silence's only purpose is not talking, and, if you will, robot off, that there's absolutely nothing else happens. Yeah, Sang just put something in our chat here, is that wisdom wisdom lives in the space between silence and expression. And Hope had shared with us earlier that sometimes we need to give space to process in silence, and so there's an allowance in silence, right? That when there's so many different levels of silence that are not just valued by not talking.
And silence is usually the only way to hear the quiet wisdom, whether that be a wisdom of the group or your own wisdom.
So I'm starting on a quilt that has silence is the only way to hear the quiet wisdom. That's a beautiful reminder again about silence, is that there's something there to be experienced. We tend to be so focused on the doing and all of the other ways in which we express. But I can see Djaloki kind of holding a smile there as to the fullness of where we are. What's coming up?
Jamie. Uh, I should
Your
shut my
smile is a
camera.
tell. It's always a tell. I just have to kind of go there, and I can see it kind of go. There's like a little twinkle, and so
My mind is being expanded here with this conversation, and I want to share this expansion. Now, well, it's not just now. It was there, but it's being reinforced now. For me, silence. So we're talking about silence in terms of sound,
mhm.
but there's visual silence, there's geographical silence, there's movement silence, there's energy silence, there's dimensional silence. When Michelangelo says, I didn't create this beautiful sculpture, it was already there. That was the silence. When a baby is conceived in the darkness of the womb of their mother, that's the silence. When we plant a seed that has to rot in the darkness of the earth to become a flower, that's the silence. I see now silence. As I said, it's the source of everything, and it's always here.
Ray put in the chat, silence is the Swiss Army knife of tools, right? Did you have more
You
to say
just
about that?
Djaloki, you just described it so beautifully to add meaning to the Swiss Army knife of silence is more than sound. It is everything around us. And I was chuckling too, is that I want a t-shirt of what you said. I want a t-shirt of what Claudia said about how to use silence so we can use that. We can advertise and promote silence.
Yeah.
Well, and of course, silence also allows us to focus. And it is in that pause that we take personally that we're asking and we're inviting ourselves to have that moment of focus as to what's alive, what's present, what's available to us in this moment. And then there's also the silences that we get to experience collectively. I mean, can you imagine a sports arena filled with 100,000 people completely silent with one another? I mean, we live in a city, Sang and I actually happen to live in the same city, which prides itself on having the noisiest sports auditorium on the planet, like in terms of decibel levels. And, sometimes people ask me why I don't go to those events. And I know that Jaloki was cautioning me not to always recognize that silence is sound. But one of the things that I feel that often happens in these larger gatherings is exactly what Claudia was saying, which is it gets filled with so much other stuff. The present moment gets filled with at a sporting event. There's the tribal colors, there's the intensity, there's the emotion, there's the drama, there's the drum beats, there's the music. It is this sensory overload of so much. And I often said, when I was first introduced to the concept of mindfulness, I said, I guess mindfulness isn't valid unless I could sit in the middle of the busiest intersection in town and not feel the grounded in space between it. And I actually held that image for a long time when there was a lot of noise around me. I would remind myself, that presence, just like you're talking about, Jaloki, is still available. It's just something we have to be able to develop the capacity to sort of access. Has anyone else experienced that in terms of their own journey with spending time personally in the silence? Because I want to be able to make sure that we expand this to group silence. I'm not so sure I have all that many experiences of group silence.
I'm just going to jump in with one experience, and it's not a dynamic experience, but what I found interesting in group sessions that I've attended, um, it was generally requested as a moment, as part of the engagement, as Yoloki has indicated. So it was an invitation essentially. So I think it didn't always evolve naturally because of the mix of people in the session or the discussion, where largely it was the push because of people watching the clock. But when someone invited or requested, it was immediately received and understood why.
It's my cross-cultural mindset is kicking in here. In the modern Western settings, often I've observed that often when to honor someone's death, someone will ask for a minute of silence, and the minute lasts 15 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
They can't stayed a minute. It's too long.
Yeah, it's like
compare-
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Sang.
No, I was gonna say it's like if somebody was exercising, like to create a visual, like if you're trying to do a plank for 1 minute,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
like you really think, and you're like, this is a really long minute, because when you're sitting in that silence with a group, and you're like, oh my god, it's only been 40. Well, because it's like, and yeah, I get it. Totally.
Exactly. Now you go into mostly indigenous shamanic cultures
Mm-hmm.
where you have the habit of elders council. You have 12 elders or less or more, and they are there to discuss, debate, think, brainstorm an issue. And someone introduce the subject, and then you have silence. And the silence, my brothers and sisters, can last hours,
Mm.
and it's fine. And then someone says something, maybe 3 words, another silence. And the council itself can last days like that. In that culture, it's normal. I believe it could serve other culture where it's not normal.
I agree. I concur. My card is now getting so full of all the notes that I'm taking that I have the fullness of awareness. You know, I listened to someone who was a very strong spiritual mentor for me, and she would always say, life is progressive, creative expression. Like, you know, people would say, well, what is the meaning of life? Well, you know, just like a seed, just like all of these other things, that there is this progressive, creative expression. But one of the things I love about what you've been talking about this morning, Djaloki, is that if before the word, before the expression was the silence. And, you know, if before anything could be expressed, the silence is necessary.
And after everything is expressed, silence.
Yeah.
Mm.
Quantum physics, the soup, infinite potential.
Somebody said something before that made me think about, I live very close to Lake Michigan, so I love to go to the lake and sit and listen to the waves. The waves to me represents Earth's respiration. And so silence doesn't have to mean no sound, as someone said earlier. But as I sit there and listen to that constant in and out of the waves, I am drawn further and further into my own silence. And so there can be, for me, there can be certainly be that sound, but it is a sound that for me helps me go deeper into my own silence. And I will say that usually the expression that comes from that, listening to the sound of the waves, is, man, I live in a lot of beauty. And I am so thankful for that. So, I don't know. I needed to express that. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. No, it's great.
Yeah, and again, you're picking up on the same thing that Djaloki was sharing with us earlier, which is if you're going to fill the silence with words, you know, ensure that they are beautiful, right?
Mhm.
Something that you were talking about is, of course, what was echoing in my mind, right? Anyone else that was a Simon and Garfunkel friend, right? Hello, darkness, my old friend, right? There is the sound of silence, right? And so if I want to build a little bit more on this whole idea of something that we can kind of grasp together, you know, if a majority of people believe that life is progressive creative expression, their version of that, right? That life, you talk about posters, you see all of these, don't miss a moment, just do it, all the sort of fulfillment messages that we get, right? Don't miss that moment, sing that song, eat that chocolate pudding, I don't know, whatever it is, then that we need to sort of fill life. Make sure that you fill your life with something. If we look at the yin yang of that and recognize that the silence is the potential, that silence is dwelling in possibility. And just like you were saying, Jaloki, is that we often as a group don't spend a lot of time in firmament. You were talking earlier before we started the show about a think tank, right? But what's interesting about most think tanks is they're really talking tanks. Yeah, and I don't mean to look at upon them negatively, right? That's not meant to be pejorative. But if there's truly a think tank, sometimes that process of marinating in something, dwelling in it, I'm going to start a timer, and in a minute, all of you are going to, all of those again are attempts to fix the silence, you know, to manage it, right? And it is something that I really appreciate about this. This will probably be the most unique Rise and Shine Sundays episode that we've done, because so much of it is drawn from listening and silence. Awake to, what's available in that silence.
Mhm.
I'd like to share something that ties in with what you just said, Jamie, as well as Yoloki, with the what we can learn from other cultures is that new forms of expression. What I observed, and it's starting to, because we're talking about this, I'm going, oh, this. We have a large indigenous population in Winnipeg, and quite often there is things that happen, and they're asked to comment or speak, and it starts off the same way each time. There's a pause, and they speak very slowly, and it slows down the heartbeat in the room, and it draws you in for listening, and it's very simple things that's usually at the heart of the issue about what has happened to the community. Yes, there was an incident, and it usually involves a few individuals, but they're always speaking from the community and the pace. And I just thought, and I can see the white people being us, being very uncomfortable. The fact that, why is it so slow? Why don't they just say it? Well, they are saying it and expressing it with a new way to listen and to understand what really happened from their perspective, not what we think happened. So I think the learning from the silence, the slowness, and then looking at ourselves to say, well, what, as you just touched, Jamie, why are we in such a hurry? Why do we think it's awkward? Why do we think it needs to be filled in right away?
Well, we've been conditioned to value it, just like Hope put in our chat here a few minutes ago, which was the same mindset that values being busy. You know,
Yeah.
we value people who are quick thinkers, right? And the reason why being around cultures that take their time, well, what's with those people? Are they just slow? That V word is really, really important. What do you value? And we have been deeply, deeply conditioned to value quick solutions, filling the silence, making again, I know all of you have heard that messaging that you have to fill every moment of your life with something, or it's like I'll be a little bit more bold about it. It's like that. It's he with the most toys at the end of the journey wins, right? You're supposed to arrive to Ithaca with a full ship of all of these things that you've gone through, right? But again, we've just been conditioned that the only value exists in what modernity wants to be able to extract. So when elders are quiet and there is this potential, that's very disorienting for a culture or for a people that what's the result? What's the result? What's the result? So, and again, we do that dance as aware beings of that tension, between but we don't necessarily value, or we don't talk about, and we don't get a chance to say, hey, everybody, why don't we just get together sometimes and be quiet? But we'll let kids do that on a play date. You guys, kids, oh, now play quietly now. I think we need to do that more with adults. I'm going to invite everybody to a party where we're all just going to play quietly. We'll go out in nature, and you can, if there's wherever you need to be, sit by a tree, pick apart a plant. What if we had group silence experiences woven into our culture that weren't tied to a religious facility where essentially modernity has co-opted that moment too, because the only reason for you to gather silently in a church is really to make sure that there's that offering plate that can get passed around when we get done with the silence. Just say a little bit more about what you put in the chat.
Because I was looking up different quotes, because I know there's all these quotes that always walk around. They float around the universe and the internet space. And, they always talk about, the most powerful person is silent and things like that. So I asked our friends at AI what were some different quotes that people say. And this one came up, which was very interesting, because my experience of silence was the silent treatment. And so I wanted to fill that void as I got older, because now I could speak, because my father was not there to keep me from speaking. And even 15 years after leaving home, to backtalk my dad probably sent my body into like a 3-day tizzy, right? And it was over the phone, right? Hundreds and hundreds of miles away. And so as I've been thinking about this topic in terms of like how that transformed as I got older, I was always silent in the space of, I will have silence and then I will do what needs to be done. I don't need to speak, right? Then when I started spending more time with myself, I was like, I want to explain this. I want to explain why this is happening, and why because as soon as someone would give me the silent treatment, that's what it was for me. It was that tension there where it was like my body's like, oh, something's wrong. I've messed up. What did I do? And I automatically will go into, what did I do? Like my daughter a couple of weeks ago said, we need to have a conversation. I was like, it wasn't silent treatment, but I was like, what do I do? It's the same thing when I say something and then someone gives me what I feel is the silent treatment. And then I will automatically go into, what did I do, instead of allowing them to be in that space. And so my silence was like what she talked about. It was born out of fear. Like fear was what was. If I spoke anything, if I said anything, I was chastised in many ways. So as I got older, it became action was easier to just do because I don't have to have the words. So I know I was sharing a story before we all came on, and I even mentioned it's my words to work on, because even though my body was calm in a situation, it's now how to formulate words that don't sound like I'm drunk because my brain is still processing that my body is safe, but that I can speak these words with confidence and say, this is what is, and have that expression. Now that, of course, is also, I can feel it right now. It's so crazy. My heart beating so fast because it's like, oh, like, what do I do? And I know I tell my clients to put their hands on their stomach to kind of ground themselves while they're talking sometimes. And it super helps, especially when you come from a space where silence was taught to you as the silent treatment when we live in this space, because it carries over into your work life,
Right.
with your children.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being, as a parent, I remember giving my kids a space, asking them a question and just being quiet for them to answer.
Right.
Because we always want to fill that void too.
Yep.
When we ask. And so I wanted to share that because
Yeah.
from the fear-based space, it's really challenging to live in silence.
If your conditioning has been being
Yes.
silenced, and what you're really talking about is the way in which, I'll build a Ray term here, the way in which modernity has screwed up, didn't swear, people, I said screwed up our
You can be
our
pardoned.
experience of silence by silencing people to do what what Hope put in the chat. It's self-erasure. There's a big difference. You talked about how your daughter said we need to have a conversation. I mean, how many times have we heard that phrase dealt to us? We need to have a conversation. We need to talk something out. But I was just thinking, I don't think anyone has ever had said to me, you know what? We need to have a silence about this. Now, modernity has, given people now, okay, we need to time out here. We need to time out here, which again is being silenced, which is a way in which of using silence as a punishment, right? So, again, the very first note I put on this card, our definition, our experience of silence is really revealing about our own conditioning around uncomfortableness, about feeling oppressed. And what Djaloki has invited us to do is that we kind of have to toss that aside, know that that is true based on the trauma that, but that's never what silence was to begin with. Silence over here, on the other hand, when an experienced in its purity, if I can use the word purity, is that potential, the unboundless, that space that's sort of rich and full in meaning. Now I feel like I'm putting words in Djaloki's mouth, but am I close to doing that dance with what we've been discussing?
Totally. And actually, to affirm you, saying, I want to thank you. You're expanding me now. And seeing, you shared about your journey. It's incredible. I silently in admiration. And to reinforce what Jamie was saying, what you call and what is called the silent treatment is very loud. this yeah, this is not silent at all. It's like a and it's heavy, and it's negative. Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
just going to throw something in if I can. Is
Of
one of
course.
the interesting things that the saying that you shared is exactly what Yoloki said, is sharing your experience and your understanding. But what's equally powerful for each of us, and including you, saying especially you, is your silence is very expressive. Is because I can see you listening.
Mm.
I can see all of you listening. I can see all of you processing what is being shared. So without saying a word, I feel it, I sense it, and I can see it. And mainly because of what we've touched on is what you, especially what you shared, saying is observe it, dummy, watch, pay attention, what is going on. And I think that's the one of the dimensions of part of the process, is that the other thing that I heard years ago when I was working in visual communication, the part of the process is you can't listen if you're talking. Think about that for a second. So for us trying to fill this noise or fill the space with more noise or more talking, um, we stopped listening. So the pause and the silence and the interaction between the expression. The silence is the expression, as Yoloki pointed out.
Mhm.
I love how beautifully you brought us back to the question, Ray.
Silence being
By
shared.
well, no, but you invited us to co-sense it and you invited us to feel it, right? So we could remove the word happens and say, what do you feel when silence is shared? What is your experience when that silence is shared? And um what happens, sometimes it's the language of, Western culture, right? Like, what's the result? Give me the results. What happened? What happened? What happened? But there is that um, open-ended sort of thing of what do you feel in the silence, and when it's shared, what's available. And you were talking about contributions. That is, I can feel Hope's presence in the room even when she pops away. But she had been contributing in the chat, and you know um, very powerful people sometimes say very few things. I think Claudia said that earlier, if I'm not mistaken. you know um and if you're present to what you're sensing and feeling in a silence, and you respond from that rather than reacting to the silence, it's a completely different expression.
It is, Jamie. It is. But I want to go back to a little bit what Sang was talking about. And I think what she was saying was that for her and for many people, I think especially a lot of women, silence, getting silence is a form of punishment. And so we have to move beyond that conditioning that if I'm silent with you, I'm punishing you.
Mhm.
And so moving beyond that is a lifetime work.
Mhm.
And until it finally, and even now, it still can be that for sure. People use silence as a form of punishment. So, but we have to get beyond that fear that, oh, I'm being punished because there's silence. Even if that's true, even if I am being punished because there's silence, there's still wisdom to be had in that. And so I need to mine deeper within myself to find that wisdom. But within a group setting, that normally is not the case, where silence is used as punishment. But what happens is, because we are conditioned to believe that silence is a form of punishment, it becomes very awkward. And so, coming back to Djaloki, and what happens in indigenous cultures with silence can be a beautiful lesson for us all. Sit in the wisdom of silence, even if it is uncomfortable, because eventually it'll stop being uncomfortable.
So, ladies and gentlemen, and all of the listeners on our YouTube channel, thank you for that, Claudia, because you really answered the question. The idea, the question is an invitation to do exactly what you said, which was to mine deeper to find your wisdom. So, in a group, what happens when silence is shared? It's an opportunity to mine deeper to find the wisdom that's available to us. Whether that's through potential, whether that's a return to source, whether that's a communion, whether or not that's a felt sense of we need more silence. But we talk about t-shirt time. We've had all of these t-shirt moments, but I was just like going, man, mine deeper, is just a really interesting invitation, which is, and again, I really think that it's so important for people to recognize that mining deeper is okay. It's not digging a hole. It's mining deeper to see what's there. We always talk about building up, right? But a silence asks us to, again, mine deeper, look beyond the appearances, sense beyond what's going on, to see what's available to us. I tell you, you guys are incredible. We're going to have to start paying people for all of their wonderfully valuable contributions on a weekly basis. We're at the end of the hour on the Breakthrough Show Network, and we're always grateful for the opportunity to be a part of the network, to be available on YouTube, and to leave this conversation as an example of something that you might want to consider, dwell in the possibility. But as we'll be exploring in the weeks ahead, part of our invitation is going to be encouraging people and being present to allowing others to develop these type of ways of communicating at this particular time on our planet. So as the weeks unfold themselves in the fall ahead, we'll be inviting you on that process, and we'll be talking about that. If you'd like to learn more about, I want to make sure before I do the close, however, is there anything alive in anyone that wants to be expressed before? Yes.
Be still and know that we are one.
Hope put in the chat. Be curious, not judgmental. Give a little more than grace. See the soul beyond the story. See the heart behind the face. Seek first to understand them, then speak gently and be true. We don't need to think the same way to let love come shining through. That was an excerpt from a friend of hers song. So
that was my immediate reaction. That's got to be one of Hope's songs.
So we will continue singing the same time next week on an impromptu a cappella experience here on Rise and Shine Sundays. Again, you're always invited to join us at RSS Live. And in fact, if you are watching, or you might want to just step into RSS Live, we're going to be chatting a little bit afterwards off air. But until then, we're very grateful that you're present to what's emerging. And I think this was one of the most talk about mind deeper, a very, very valuable conversation from all the different ways of people expressing. So my sincere gratitude to everyone for that. Until next week, wake up to what's emerging with us every Sunday here at 10 a.m. on the Breakthrough Show Network. And until then, bye-bye, everybody.